Afternoon, everybody. First of all, I need to compliment Rabbi Green and Rabbi Broide for picking the topic that is so apropos to the very time that we're on. New beginnings. So we just started last week the first parsha, and
Right.
then Noach. Look at Noach, who has to face the most traumatic, probably new beginning that anybody can have. It the whole world's human population, except those on his teva, on the ark, were obliterated as the animal life. Tremendous challenge he had to face. The Maharal and others raised and addressed the question. We know famously that Noach sent the dove and took multiple missions until the bird could bring back some signs that the earth was starting to return to the new norm. And yet the dove was, the Yonah was not the first bird that Noach sent. First he tried sending the Orev, the raven, but the raven basically was on strike. He went up in the air and he flew around, but he didn't fly to the mission that was assigned to him. And the Medrash says that the raven was prepared for a mission, but not this mission, a different mission. And what mission was that? Very interesting. Maybe others do also, but I saw in the Tosas Harosh actually says is that that the raven kept flying around ad Yevoshet Hamayim. If you read that word Yevoshet, which is Yud Shin Vet Tov, if you read it backwards, it spells Tishbi. Who's Tishbi? Eliyahu Hanavi. So that the raven wanted, if he had one mission to do, he wanted the mission of Eliyahu Hanavi. What was the mission of Eliyahu Hanavi? That the ravens brought Eliyahu provisions. They brought him what to drink and what to eat while he was out by the Nachal, by a stream on a divine mission in which he was going to make a proclamation to the nation about what's forthcoming from Hashem. So he said, that sounds interesting. Here the raven wants to help, but somehow a communication from Hashem to take place. So why was that more important to the raven than Noach's mission to him? Well, the thing is that Eliyahu was not really on such a great mission because he wanted the people to know it as a messenger of Hashem. He says, Hashem controls the rain. You want to keep up, evil ways. Well, then Hashem's going to stop the rain. There's going to be a famine that's going to come. So in order for Eliyahu to deliver that painful message of difficult times that's going to come to the region, so Eliyahu had to survive at least long enough, thank God longer, to deliver the message. So on the surface, if with the first information I gave you may say, it looks like it was a good mission for the raven, but it wasn't such a good mission because the raven only accepted that mission because it kept the deliverer of the bad news and the one who would implement the actual beginning of famine kept Eliyahu alive and nourished. So the raven chose missions that had bad news associated. He didn't want to help Noach repopulate the world to start life over again. And I think that comes down, to attitudes that any one person can have. What do we focus on? We focus on the challenges, we focus on the future, we focus on what I can do. And I know I see Rabbi Broide, is nodding, and Rabbi Broide is a guy who's brought fulfillment and positivity, helping people find avenues that they can express themselves and do good for the world, and which also models the federation's program. And the federation, it certainly has been helping in many ways. Individuals, organizations really help to forge the new normal that we want as much as possible and to look as much as possible. So Rabbi Broide, thanks for being with us just at the perfect time. Rabbi Broide, you're muted, Rabbi Broide. You have to unmute yourself.
I am unmuted now. Thank you. The famous mute button. It's now again, part of the new norm. You're muted. So first of all, I want to thank you, Rabbi Yasgur. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this unfortunately not in person but online experience. I only wish, and I hope really, really soon we'll be able to do this once again in person. We'll be able to see everyone face to face and really get to experience what it means to have a community, a true community, not a virtual community that we're in right now. But we're in very challenging times. Times are not easy. Times are certainly, and even right now, to talk about challenging times, I think the lawnmower, some guy's doing the lawn outside. So I do apologize for the background noise if you happen to hear that. But this is what it means to, you're working from your home office. Things are not normal. This is certainly, and I hope this is not going to be part of what we'll talk about soon as being a new normal. But personally, now that we're many months into this experience, I would have liked to have said that when I gave the topic in that things would have been different. It's not as different as I thought it might be by this point, but I certainly still feel very unsettled. I'm sure we all do to some extent, some more and some less. It's certainly what we'll call a time of uncertainty. We're living in probably one of the greatest times of uncertainty in recent memory, certainly in my lifetime. And we're still required to have what we call emunah. We're still required to have faith. And even though we just began a new cycle, we just began the Torah all the way from the beginning. Now we're about to get into some of the details of Parshat Noach. The time that we're in right now is not getting easier. I'm not just talking about COVID. I'm not just talking about Corona. You have the election, which is literally days away. I was watching last night. There was a presentation done at the local school board. It was on TV for a number of hours. They're going back and forth. Should they hire rehire this principal that said some things about the Holocaust? Whether the statements are true, whether the statements were misinterpreted. So he was principal, which was told to vacate his position. Then they said, well, he can come back. Now we're putting pressure as a community not to come back. The board was inundated with more than 1,200 phone calls, and they're required before even issuing a judgment now to listen to every one of those phone calls, which came from our Jewish community, give reasons why it should not be rehired. And then when you even hear the few people that got up to try and defend this principle by saying, well, things that, and this was in front of Holocaust survivors. Many people testified that were Holocaust survivors who had actually been on trips that I participated on, like the March of the Living, where one person gets up and says, well, why shouldn't I be able to question something I never saw? You're saying, we're talking about the Holocaust. This is now someone that lives in our community in Boca that's trying to make that judgment. Another person got up and said, well, he was hired, then he was fired. Now we rehired him again, and we might fire him again. Can't do that because it's going to make us look incompetent. So you say to yourself, what is going on out there? Talk about being a time of uncertainty, a time that's very unsettling. Going to shul, certainly still feel very unsettled. Every shul's got different policies depending on different considerations, age, health. But even when I go back to Boca Raton Synagogue, I still don't feel like I'm back at Boca Raton Synagogue. Doesn't feel like the same shul. Shul's open, socially distanced, everyone's wearing masks. Okay, so you get the daven, but it doesn't feel like the same davening. I was talking to someone yesterday and they were saying, and they really, really want to try and reconnect with many of the classes and many of the shirim, but they're struggling. I said, you should know, I'm an employee there. I work at BRS for the last 21 years, and I don't feel comfortable back at the shul right now. Things are just very unsettling. Even when you get a chance to speak between Mincha and Marav just for a few minutes, and you get up in front of everybody there. Not only is it hard to speak with a mask on, it's very, very difficult. But you can't really see the facial expressions, get a good read on the participants, the audience, and it doesn't even feel like you're speaking to them. Right now, at least we get to see each other's faces. I can see who I'm talking to. So it's very, very tough. It's very unsettling. We're at a time of uncertainty. And yet we're still supposed to have something called faith. Emunah plays a big role in where we are, but yet we still feel it doesn't always make us feel that much better. My children, my own children, right? I've got 4 living here. I've got 2 living in Israel. My daughter who's in the IDF, and she's still, this is year number 3, and she's in the Israeli Air Force. Normally they get, after 2 weeks, they get to take some time off. They get to go on a trip back to their apartment. She's been on base for weeks on end. It's not easy. I want to go to Israel. I've already had 3 trips booked and canceled because of this experience. Federation trip was actually supposed to be taking place this week. Community trip. I was supposed to be in Germany last week. I walk into the Federation building, which is still officially closed. We're all working remotely. Big poster board in the lobby. Join us in Israel this week. It's not happening. March of the Living next year. It's already not clear if it's happening. It's a good chance it's shut down internationally for a second year. And if it does go even this year, which it didn't go last year, that means you're going to have another, maybe a much smaller group, but that's again another 15,000 teenagers that are never going to get that experience. 30,000 Jewish teenagers that will never get to go to Poland with survivors. You hope one day maybe they'll pick it up on a birthright trip or something. But for the most part, it's an experience which unfortunately now is missed. Even as we talk right now, I'm in the midst of planning a very, very exciting trip to Rwanda. You say Rwanda. Well, first of all, I'm from South Africa. So I grew up in South Africa. But Rwanda is not South Africa. Well, we're planning a trip right now for public school, local private school, Jewish students, not yeshiva or day school students. A week in Rwanda, service learning, get your hands dirty, helping a community. We need a hook to get everyone to come. Then we're going to Israel, hopefully for 3.5 weeks. But no one knows if these trips are even going to happen. Again, just very unsettling. Everything about what we're trying to do in terms of outreach, everything we're trying to do in terms of engagement, helping those that are not as connected get more connected. So we're going full force. We're saying what is going to happen. But you and I know that there's a chance it might not happen. So what do you do? Things have changed. Lots of things have changed. And what we call the new normal, some things will go back to normal, but many things might not. Are there things that we experience now that we hope actually won't go back? Yeah, maybe there are things that just came as unintended consequences that were really, really positive. So maybe we can actually take a nice positive spin on some of the things that have happened. I'll give you some more. I'll give you some examples. And then we'll get into the connection and maybe a lesson from this week's Parsha that can hopefully uplift us and bring us into a new place as we begin, as the Rabbi just said, a new year. It's a new year. It's a new Parsha. It's a new everything. And God willing, there'll be a vaccine at some point. No one knows when, but God willing soon. So I'll just give you an example of some things that have actually happened in the last number of months, which I never saw coming. So first of all, we've all got different friends that maybe there was a chance we could have reconnected with. Technology has enabled us to reconnect in ways which are so simple and so easy if we just figure out how the technology works. So because of WhatsApp, right? I got my WhatsApp over here. We're able to reconnect with every one of the guys that I went to yeshiva with almost about 25 years ago. An incredible group of guys, but unfortunately, we live all over the world and we all lost touch. Some of us have been in touch, but to get every single one, it's about 45 of us together. Then once we had that, it took about 2 days. We contacted one of the rabbis, the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva. Yeshiva's not even around anymore. And I would say for the last 6 months, every week, we've had a shir together, twice a week, one rabbi, Rosh Yeshiva. Amazing. And I hope that doesn't stop. Why should that have to stop? I'll tell you something else, just as a bonus. I got this great email from Walmart. Everyone goes shopping. Maybe you go to Publix, Winn-Dixie, Kosher Market, Aroma, Target, Walmart. I got an email from Walmart this week. And you know what they said? They said, I have saved 23 hours by shopping online, not even counting all the money. There was a big, big dollar sign of the money that they said I saved just by shopping. How did that happen? Because I get delivery. I never had this. I never wanted to try it. but I was forced to try something new, something I never thought or saw myself trying, simply because I had no other option. My wife had corona. I couldn't leave. I was quarantined along with my children. Walmart dropped off whenever we needed a delivery. It was so easy. 23 hours, that's a full day. It's almost an entire day I've got back and I never used. What a bonus that is. Something I never anticipated. And I can tell you right now, that's not going to stop. That makes life easier. And of course, if some of you tuned in, and I'll reference this later with an example, one of the great classes that we started, which turned out not to be much of a class, some of you became fans and you started watching Rabbi Goldberg, Rabbi Moskowitz, and myself on Behind the Bima. What a great way to interact with others, both locally, also hear inspiring stories of those all over the world. That was never even a thought before Corona. And yet that's going to be something that's going to stick along and endure for many, many, God willing, years to come. But I want to talk to you about faith and certainty. And I think there's something that we can see from this week's Parsha, something which is so profound, something so powerful, and something that we could all, again, take something hopefully meaningful from. You see, beginning of the Parsha, we're introduced to Noach. Noach is a fascinating human being. And just to study Noach alone is interesting, and there's certainly a lot to say about Noach. But when you compare him and you contrast him to some of the other great Jewish leaders that follow him, for example, Avraham, we're going to learn a lot about Avraham in the coming weeks, Moshe Rabbeinu, you start to see some very, very interesting differences between, call it the leadership styles. One of the things that we know that happens at the beginning when we're introduced to Noach, we're introduced to someone who is perfect. Ishtam. There's no one that's ever been so perfect. He was so great. He was a tzaddik, right? He was the greatest tzaddik. Imagine being the type of person that never made a mistake. Whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever God said, Noach did, and he did it perfectly. But we also are introduced to a person that doesn't really speak, doesn't say anything. He's told what to do, and he does it. But there's no argument. There's no discussion. And Noach is the one whose generation is terminated. We know that when Noach is on the Teva, when he's on the ark, after the flood is over, it's Hashem that goes over to Noach and says, listen, it's time. Come out of the ark. Come out of the ark. There's no more water. You can come out. The Medrash is puzzled. The Medrash says, I don't understand. Noach said to himself, since I only entered the ark with the permission of Hashem, should I be allowed to leave it without permission? Hashem told me, go in. Maybe I'm supposed to just stay here. And it's only when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when Hashem says to Noach, are you actually looking for permission? And that's when he says to him, come out of the ark. Fascinating dialogue between Noach and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Noach says, can I come out? Let me ask you a question. What would you do after being 40 days on an ark? The only thing you kind of know over there is that there are animals everywhere. And you know that there's a world outside which was destroyed, and now it's finally, the flood has ended. What would you do? You know, give me another few minutes. Let me read another page in the newspaper. You know, let me go and walk around and see how the animals are doing. What are you talking about? You break down that door and you run out. Finally, time to get there. I remember one time we took a trip. We took a big group to Israel. This is one of the funniest stories I remember. We're telling everyone, these are first timers. You remember the first time you went to Israel. We said, you know what you're going to do? As soon as we land, here's what we're going to start cheering. We're going to start singing. It was a very big group. We had most of the plane. And I said, there's a custom, even though you can't really do it now, but you know, in theory, wanted to get everyone excited for the trip. We said that when you go off the plane, people love getting to Israel. They actually go down on the ground. You kiss the ground. People love that. Kiss the ground of Israel. The only problem now is that you don't actually go down onto the tarmac. Sometimes when we have a charter flight, we still get to do that. You go right into the airport. But guess what? So as soon as we touch down, As soon as we waited, we're singing and everyone's going crazy, and we're waiting for the pilot to say, Nick, now unbuckle your seatbelts, and everyone's getting more anxious and getting more excited. So fine, unbuckle. Everyone goes onto the top and takes out their hand luggage, and everyone's waiting in the aisle. They couldn't open the door. El Al said there was a problem with the locking mechanism. We're all locked on the plane for like another 15 minutes. But I can tell you, if you were on that plane, not for, a 12-hour flight, but if you were on for 40 days, I don't think it would have made a difference if the door was locked or not. You're just broken down the door. Everyone would have just pushed their way out. And Noah says, just now picture the scene again. Can I come out of the ark? The Medrash goes on to add and says, that Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai says, if I had been there, I literally would have smashed those doors down. So you're not the only one. You're in very, very good company. I think the moral is, and it's very clear, that when it comes to rebuilding a shattered world, think about the world that we're in right now. It's not just Boca that's been hit by Corona. It's not just your family up in the Northeast, wherever they may be that's been hit by Corona, maybe in Israel. The entire world has been hit. We are literally going to leave an ark and have to rebuild a shattered world. The moral is, you do not wait for permission. God gives us permission. He expects us to go ahead. And I remember hearing from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, should have a refuah shlema. Many, many people are davening for him right now. Fortunately diagnosed recently with cancer. But he said the most profound thing, and I remember hearing this, and it stuck with me. When you think about Jewish history, and you think about what it means to have an understanding of what faith is in Judaism. Remember, we spoke about that at the beginning. Very turbulent times right now, but we're told to have emunah. So what exactly does faith mean? So we know that Rashi, interestingly enough, is coming up in his parish, and it's obviously very, very centrally tied to the way our Chachamim, our sages, understand why God began the Jewish people, not with Noah, but with Abraham. Think about this. Because Noah, says the Torah, walked with Hashem. Right? That was the intro to this week's Parsha. Eila told us, Noah, Ish tzadik tamim haya b'dorosav, and es ha'elokim hishalech Noah. Very important words. What happened? Noah, as our Parsha says, walked with Hashem, which is not a bad place to be. It's better to be walking with Hashem than probably anywhere else. But Hashem says to Avraham, walk on ahead of me. This point is not new. But the drama, just feel the power of this medrash. So what's the understanding of faith in Judaism? Right now, we need that faith. We have faith, but the faith is getting tried. We keep doing it, and it's not easy. We feel alone. Sometimes we feel helpless. Sometimes we just want to feel like we're moving in the right direction rather than in the wrong direction. Someone just told me the numbers again are going up. I hope they're not. I hope they go up and then they come down. So how do we understand and how do we maintain faith? To have the courage to be that pioneer, to do something new, to take the road, what we'll say is less traveled, and to really venture out into what we'll call the unknown. That's what Avraham and Sarah had done when they left their home. Remember, Noah now is leaving his figurative home, the Teva, the ark. Avram and Sarah left the home too. It was actually their home, the family's house. It's what all of the Jews did in the days of Moshe when they left Egypt and they traveled into the Midbar, guided only by that pillar, that fire by night. You see, Rabbi Sachs said the most unbelievable thing. And you think about what faith is. Faith is precisely the courage to take a risk. knowing that, as we say in Tehillim, I can walk through that shadow. I'm sorry, the valley of the shadow of death, but I'm going to fear no evil. You know why? Because God is with me. But I'm going to walk through. In spite of the fact that I'm afraid, in spite of the fact that I don't know what's on the other side, it's okay because Kadosh Baruch Hu is right with me. It took faith to challenge all of the religions of the ancient world. Just imagine if you were living the next big Jewish holiday we're all going to celebrate, Hanukkah, right? The Hellenists, the Greeks, the image of the perfection of what the world can look like, the arts, the culture, the sports. And then you have these Jews that say, you know what? No, that's not what we think the ideal person looks like. That's not the way that we want to relate to our Creator. Challenged the worldview, so to speak. I don't think there were people that said, you're crazy. Why would you do something that doesn't make any sense to most people? It took what we'll call the faith of Rabbi Yeshua ben Gamla to build. This goes back almost 2,000 years. The world's first compulsory Jewish educational system. That took courage. That's called stepping out of the box. Last night on our show, Behind the Bima, we had a fantastic guest. And if you haven't seen the episode, I mean, Rabbi Goldberg really, really gets into some great questions with Judge Ruchi Fryer. I don't know if you know this, but not too many judges coming from the Hasidic community that happened to be women. In fact, she was the first. When they told her, why go to college? No one in our community is going to college. She said, you know what? I really believe that not only can I do it, but I can do something great with it. Something that the Torah expects of me to accomplish. And she went ahead and she, even though she had 3 children, I believe at that point when she was 30, she began college. It said, okay, so even if you graduate college, you're going to get into graduate school. How are you going to be able to pass the LSAT? How are you going to be able to sit for the bar and pass the bar? And one by one, in spite of all the challenges, in spite of all the naysayers, she felt that she had this opportunity and she was going to take it. In many cases, in many, many cases, such as the fate of innovators, the people concerned had to face a lot of criticism, opposition, and many times even disregard. You have to be prepared to be lonely. Sometimes, at best, you'd hope to be just misunderstood, but many times vilified. She was the judge. She started this ambulance corps that was dedicated to making sure that women felt comfortable having women as first responders. Something which in New York is not happening. You go to Israel, you got United Hatzalah, Ichud Hatzalah. Not only is it men volunteering and women volunteering, you got everyone. You've got Jews, you got Muslims, you got everyone together working together. That's why we always hear about the term Ichud Hatzalah. It's United Hatzalah. But in the Northeast, it wasn't like that. And she pushed the status quo and she said, I'm going to figure out a way how to make this happen so that everyone can feel comfortable, in spite of the people that came out against her. Albert Einstein famously said, if my theory of relativity is proven successful, Germany will claim me as German, and France will declare me a citizen of the world. But should my theory prove to be untrue, France will say that I am a German, and Germany will declare that I am a Jew. To be a pioneer, as Jews know throughout our history, you have to be prepared to spend a long time in that wilderness. Noach, this week's parsha, we'll see, spent a long time on that teva. But he probably would have spent a lot longer had he not been invited to leave. The new world would never have begun. He would have just stayed in the teva, just stayed in the ark. If you think about how Israel was built over the years, 2,000 years, people yearning to come back. People had faith when they finally got back. they began to build. I heard an incredible story a few weeks ago, and I'll never forget this story. You see, there was a leader of the Israeli Air Force. Not my daughter. My daughter's in the Israeli Air Force. She's not the leader yet, maybe one day. And his father was a Holocaust survivor. I forgot his name right now, but we have a video we put out. If you look on Facebook, you can see the video. And he's a type of Israeli leader, again, one of the highest positions, leading one of the biggest arms of the Israeli army, the IDF. And he's told that he was supposed to go to a meeting with the prime minister. And he was the type of person that didn't enjoy going to meetings. He would rather do his job. Many of these meetings are more formalities. They'll be more of a photo op than anything else. And he wasn't interested in just mingling for mingling's sake. I have a job to do. I got to do it. So when he got the invitation, he told his secretary, do me a favor. Please tell them I just can't make it. I have another commitment. A few weeks go by. Secretary comes in to meet with him. Says, you know what? This is your schedule for the upcoming week. You've got this, you got that. Don't forget, you've got a meeting with the prime minister. Meeting with the prime minister. Didn't I tell you that you should cancel that meeting? I didn't want to go to that meeting. Well, to tell you the truth, I found out a little bit more about it. It wasn't just a meeting. It was actually a dinner, and it was a private dinner. It was going to be with you, head of the state of Israel, as well as the head of, I don't think it was Poland, but another country that was obviously very involved in what happened in the Holocaust. So you got two presidents and you've got the head of the Israeli Air Force. So he was a little disappointed. He says, you know, you don't get to make the decisions. You work for me. But like a real good Israeli, she says back, I know, but I did this for you because I think that you were making the wrong decision. That wouldn't happen probably here in America, but in Israel, the secretary can say that back. So sure enough, he agrees to have the meeting under one condition. Can you please call the president and let him know that I would like to bring my father? Bring your father? Sure. I'm sure they would have no issue with that. So they get the permission. A few days go by, goes to pick up his father. They're heading to Jerusalem. They're going to go to have dinner. And sure enough, his father turned to him. His father, who happened to have been a Holocaust survivor. He was actually on a train going to Auschwitz. And somehow he was able to jump off. Unfortunately, his entire family was murdered. Never saw them again. This was back in 1945. Ends up moving somehow. He ended up getting to Israel, starting a family. So he looks at his son as they're in the car approaching the prime minister of Israel's home. And he says, do you understand what's going on right now? Do you understand what we're about to do? So the son says, yeah, we're going to have dinner. We're going to meet with the president, prime minister. Says, no, I don't think you really understand. Let me explain this to you. We are going to have dinner with the prime minister of Israel. Says, I heard you. He said, I got it. Said, repeated it again. Father said, we are going to have dinner with the president of the state of Israel. He goes on again. Then he says, he repeats it a few more times. Then he says, you know what? We are going to have dinner with the president of Israel and the president of, let's call it Poland. And he says it over and over and over and over again. And then he adds on, we are going to dinner with the president and the other president and my son, who is now the leader of the Israeli Air Force. Repeats it again. He says, can you imagine after the Holocaust, if you would have told me that I would have survived the war, I would have never believed you. There was no state of Israel. And you're going to tell me that there will one day be a state? You're going to tell me that one day there'll be a state and I'm going to have dinner with its president? You're going to tell me one day there's going to be a state who's going to have I'm going to have dinner with its president. They're going to have a standing army called the IDF, the Tzahal, and my son is going to be the head of the Air Force? You have to understand, these are dreams which no one could ever dream because they're too unbelievable. But that's what the Jews have always done. Noach didn't get off the teva. He stayed. Let's remember, it's not a carte blanche to do whatever we want. Far from it. Not all innovation is constructive. Some can be very destructive indeed. But this principle of, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, not walk with me, walk on ahead. The idea that the Creator wants us, his greatest creation, to be creative, is what makes Judaism unique in the high value that it places on each and every one of us. Every single one of us has struggled over the last few months. There's no question about it. But we've also seen light. We've also seen how easy it is to help one another. Simple thing like a phone call to check in on someone. How are you? You're going to the grocery store. Let me pick you up something. I'm already here. What do you want? Or just giving someone a nice little gift, just to let them know that you're thinking of them, has all given us a little bit more faith. Faith is the courage to take a risk for the sake of God or the Jewish people, to begin a journey to a distant destination, knowing that there are going to be hazards along the way, but also knowing that God is with us, giving us strength if we align our will with his will. Faith is not certainty, but the courage to live with uncertainty. And I think that's something that each and every one of us are living with right now. Faith is not certainty, but the courage to live with uncertainty. I've got a good partner. He's watching over us. And I really, really want to thank all of you for joining me here today. And Rabbi Yasker, thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you, Rabbi Broide, for being with us and for your
words.
Go up to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Broide. Thank you, Rabbi Yasker. I also want to thank Dr. Jack Prince.
Yes, thank you.
Arranges the Lunch and Learn programs, and ask everyone to please put on their calendar December 2nd, which will be the next Lunch and Learn. Perhaps we'll be lucky to have lunch then. Who knows? But at least we can learn together as we've done today. Rabbi Broide, again, thank you so very much for your beautiful message.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Rabbi
Thank you.
Broide, great show last night.
Thank you.
It was wonderful listening to you.
More to come.
Rabbi, thank you so much. But I do want to let you know there's somebody in our community. Her name is Karen Moskowitz. She was one of the first people of Hatzalah in Staten Island.
Oh, wow.
She worked with Hatzalah in Staten Island.
That's great
Yes,
to
so
know.
I did want to mention that.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Rabbi Broide.
Wonderful Shabbos. Thank you so much.
Join us next week. We're going to be going on location to all these new restaurants apparently that are opening up in our community.
Oh,
So
great.
Oh, wow.
big behind the beamer next week.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.